And General Alexander became director of the National Security Agency in 2005. It's an 8-year period which parallels very much enormous developments in the technological world. And so, of course, we look forward to his view of what these challenges are. But I'm also struck that within the last few days, the whole discussion of intelligence has changed. I know there are a number of faculty members here who teach courses on national security, and they know when putting it forward, not all the students immediately latch onto the question of the dilemmas which exist in trying to compare the intelligence requirements of national security with the demands of limited government and sensitivities to privacy. But that dilemma is perennial. It's existed for a long time. It certainly tends to be emphasized in the moment around us. But in any case, what's going to be most interesting is the General's view of these matters and the things which he sees are most important. Let me mention very quickly that he's a graduate of the United States Military Academy. He holds 4 master's degrees, holds one in business administration, electronic warfare, one in physics, and one in national security studies. When he graduated from the academy, he entered armor. And incidentally, he was also director, I think, of intelligence for the 1st Armored Division in both Desert Shield and Desert Storm. His career has centered around intelligence. Some of the very earliest assignments were with the Army Security Agency, something which from my distant past I still remember, which has now changed its name 5 or 6 times. But in any case, that of course is an organization with close relationships with the National Security Agency. On the broad scale, he also worked for the Joint Chiefs of Staff on an important report where he was deputy director, a report on requirements, assessment, capabilities, and doctrine. He was director of intelligence for the Central Command, one that most of you are familiar with. And he served as the commanding general of the Intelligence and Security Command, which I believe still has the ASA-type operations under it. And more recently, ending in 2005, as a deputy chief of staff for the Intelligence Department of the Department of the Army. And then he received his appointment, given a position of trust, as director of the National Security Agency in 2005. And he became commander of the Cyber Command in 2010. The positions that he's held for an entire career are positions of trust, and of course with enormously complicated matters and critical intelligence importance to the security of the nation. It's indeed an honor and an enormous pleasure to present to you General Keith Alexander.
Thank you, Frank. Thanks for that great introduction. A few things. First, I understand we have about 40 students from the Baltimore City Community College. Please raise your hands. Thanks for being here. Let's give them a big round of applause. Right? So, from my perspective, you're the future for this country, you and what you represent. So a lot of what we're going to talk about hopefully will resonate with you. And the ideas of what we can and should be doing in the future are things that you're going to carry forward. So thanks for being here. Thank you very much. I also have a friend here, Bud Forrester. Are you here someplace? Hey, sir. Army astronaut. Let's give Bud a big round of applause, one of my mentors. There's some... That's right. I forgive it. And we also, I'm going to talk about intelligence and cyber, but, I thought one of the things that I like to start out with is we have great people at NSA and at Cyber Command. And one of those great people are here tonight. He retired recently. Over 60 years of service to NSA and our nation. George Cotter, would you please stand? Let's give George a big round of applause. Where are you, George? Oh, there he is. Okay, back there. 60 years. From as the agency started, tremendous, absolutely tremendous. You know, I have served as the director for over 8 years and as the commander of the Joint Functional Component Command Net Warfare since 2005, and then that became Cyber Command. One of the things that impresses me are the great people that we have at NSA, at Cyber Command, in our military. And so part of the discussion that we have today that I want to give to you is about those great people, what they do on the intelligence side, and how that's important for what we do in cyber. You know, because with everything that's going on, they're the real patriots. They really are. They're the ones that have acted nobly. Every one of them takes an oath to the Constitution when they come on board. Earlier this week, I had the opportunity to conduct a promotion ceremony for 27 of our seniors who are being elevated to senior status. And the first thing we do is take the oath of office, all of us, to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. We take an oath to the Constitution, not just to defend this nation, but to defend our civil liberties and privacy. So I want you to know that. A couple of the things that we're going to talk about, there's a lot of issues about these programs. So here's my thoughts to you. These are programs that were developed to defend this country. I am not wed to these programs. If we can come up with a better way of doing them, we should, period. These are programs that we're using to protect this country. We haven't been able to come up with better ones. That's why I'm glad the class from Baltimore Community College is here, because hopefully in your time we will come up with a better way of doing it. And that's where you and the folks can really look at this, because I think that's important. The second part is NSA is a part of a bigger military and intelligence community team to keep this country safe. And we're going to talk about that because I think that's huge for our nation. You know, every one of us remember 9/11. You remember where you were, what was going on, what happened when the first plane hit, what was going on, and then the second plane hit, and everybody, it changed our lives. And we at NSA had this great big picture of a fireman. And you remember the firemen that were running up the steps to save other people only to lose their lives. That's etched on our hearts and our minds forever. And the thing that I remember about that was a picture of the fireman handing a flag off to the military, and I had our intelligence community, and we, the military and intelligence community, said, we've got it from here. We've got it from here. And we moved the military forward. And the one thing, and this is where George and the whole team, and I know there's others from NSA here as well, and from the military and from Cyber Command, we sent people into Iraq and Afghanistan, a lot of people. NSA has deployed more than 6,000 people into Iraq and Afghanistan. And our job was to provide them the intelligence that they need to fight and win. And if Dave Petraeus was here, now he's a classmate, much older than me. Okay, that might not be true. I hope this isn't being recorded. It is, isn't it? Okay. Much faster than me, too. He was the commander in Iraq when we took a system forward that we called the Real-Time Regional Gateway. And the reason we put that there was to help cut the timeline down for the actionable intelligence that they need. And those systems help change the war in Iraq. We, NSA, learned how to take intelligence and make it real time in Iraq, and it changed the outcome of that war. This was huge, and it's relevant to the current debate. It changed the way that war was conducted. And perhaps more importantly, we were so proud of the NSA military and civilian that went forward. In one case, we had what we called the Mad Dog teams, two-person teams that would lead combat forces to where the threat was and identify them. Two-person teams. Of those 50 people, 47 earned combat ribbons in their first 90 days. 94% would earn combat ribbons for being in combat. Over that period, we've lost 20 people in Iraq, Afghanistan, and on the war on terror from NSA, from the cryptologic enterprise, that have been added to our memorial wall. And, you know, it's sad to sit there because these are all young people that have given their lives for the good of this nation to help ensure that they could bring their fellow people home. You think about it, there's no greater service than to lay down your life than for your fellow man. They did that. And those are the people that we're talking about. They're the ones that are working for our nation to protect this nation still. Now, from my perspective, this business record FISA, and we're going to talk about that and these programs, it's like holding a hornet's nest. And you know, my dad would say, I thought I taught you better. Don't hold a hornet's nest. But we're holding this hornet's nest for the good of the nation. And we would like to put it down. We would like to cast it aside. But if we do, it is our fear that there will be a gap and the potential for another 9/11. And we would not have done our duty. So our duty would be find a better way. We're going to talk about that. It's also important to note we have learned from our operations in Iraq and in Afghanistan. We have learned a great deal about the threat, how they work, who they are, what their numbers are, how these networks come together, and we know they want to kill Americans. It doesn't have to be logical, but it's true. And the one thing that NSA and the rest of the intelligence community brings to the table is the foreign side of this. In 9/11, we were faulted for not connecting the dots. We know a great deal about the foreign side of this threat. We have great collection systems out there. Some of those collection systems have been mischaracterized even today in the press, and I'll talk about that in a few minutes. But we know about the threat. The issue becomes, how do we connect the threat to what's going on here in the country and do that in a way that continues to protect our civil liberties and privacy? We're a community, we're a nation, everybody at NSA is a U.S. citizen too. When we look at this, the issue is how do we do both? And that's where this program, the Business Records FISA program, comes in. Let me tell you what that's about. In there, we put all our phone numbers, the two from the date, time group, and the duration of the call, and that's it. No names, no content, no emails. We don't need that. We're looking from the foreign side, are one of those numbers talking to one of those things that we see in Iraq, Afghanistan, or somewhere out there. And all we need to do is tell the FBI that that number in the states that is doing it is talking to something that is a true threat to this country. That's what we've learned. That's what we can do. The FBI takes it from there, uses their authorities to take it. There is a great case in point that was used in some of the live discussions, and I'll give you it here. In 2009, Najibullah Zazi, this is the one threat case. We had insights from some of our collection in Pakistan, actually under FAA, the FISA Amendment Act 702, we intercepted an email, lawfully intercepted it. And there was discussions about recipes, weddings, and a bomb. It's not like my wedding. I do remember it, if my wife is listening. So we shared that with the FBI. In that email was a number. And the FBI came back and said the number is Najibullah Zazi and is associated with this al-Qaeda person. Given that number, and only that number, we were able to look into the business record FISA and see a number in New York and a number in Raleigh and another number. The one in Raleigh was associated with the Raleigh 8. We saw associations with other extremists, and we were able to tell the FBI that number in New York is extremely important. Now, they had insights to parts of that already, but we could tell them that there were terrorist groups associated with these numbers. Adis Medajunin was in New York. Between he and Najibullah Zazi, they were planning a mass attack on the New York City subway that would have been the biggest attack since 9/11. The great FBI, in a matter of 6 days, stopped that whole thing because they had the intelligence and we had the tools and the insights to stop it. So what we've done as a nation is put together that data so that we could look at it and defend this country. In 2012, less than 300 numbers were approved to be looked at in that database. That's how carefully we use it. And you know, when I look at this, if you look at just this month of November, no, I'm just kidding, I was going to get the Frank part here, it's October. I do that a lot too. In October, 2,336 people have been killed, 1,510 injured in Pakistan, Afghanistan, Syria, Iraq, and Nigeria from terrorist acts. Over the past decade, we've had no mass casualties here, and that's not by accident. That's not luck. That's great work, great partnership, and the tools and stuff that we need to prevent terrorist acts. That's how that's happening. And people still wish us harm. This will not go away. So we have to have intelligence. We have to have partnerships. We have to work together. And we believe we can defend the country and protect our civil liberties and privacy. So when you think about who gets to look at that database, it's less than 35 people. My data's in there. My kids' data's in there. My wife's data's in there. In fact, between my wife and my daughters, I have 4 daughters and 16 grandchildren, I think that's 50% of the data. And to ensure their security, I would put the data in there every day. You know, there's enough problems. You know, we talked about someone passing here this month, a loved one, without having terrorists on our soil. And we've got to do that, and we've got to do much more. So this is how we connect the dots. What do we do to protect civil liberties and privacy? It's amazing. NSA and Cyber Command has to go through the same things, goes through significant training to work with this data. Everybody, including me, have to go through what we call U.S. Signals Intelligence Directive 18 training on how to handle U.S. persons' data and what you do with it. And then if they work the business records, FISA, or FAA 702, they have to do another 4 courses. And each one of those, including me, have to take a test and pass it. Have to take a test and pass it. You have to be certified. And how to properly handle the data to ensure we do it right. There's another part of this. Partners in industry, many of you here tonight, and with our allies. We can't do this ourselves. We have to have partnerships. But I think it's important to note that in these programs, these aren't relationships where industry is coming up and dumping data on our doorstep. It is compelled by a court order. They have to share it. And from my perspective, the numbers that they share are small. We need to get that out. We're working with the companies from the Department of Justice so the American people will know exactly what is shared in volume. Because when I think you see that, you'll see that this country does a great job in providing oversight to this whole program and ensuring that we get the intelligence we need in a lawful manner. It's absolutely superb. How many other countries go through that level of court oversight and action to handle and go after terrorists? Because we're using our infrastructure to protect our people. It's unparalleled. It's phenomenal. But we also need our allies here. You know, there were some recent articles, recent meaning this morning, about our collection operations that mischaracterize exactly what we do and how we do it. We are a global organization. In order to understand what the terrorists are doing, in order to handle those foreign intelligence issues that we get, we have to have collection. It is not targeted against a company. It is not targeted against ABC. These are flows that you would expect our agency to go after and to work with our partners. And I think it's important for you to know that when we work with our partners, we don't just use their law. We use our law too. We have to follow both. And what it says, protect U.S. persons' data, we do that, and they have to do that too wherever we partner. So that's a huge step forward. Think about that in all those partnerships. And some of those things today actually talked about one of those partnerships and the way we work with them. And it's all to collect the data that we need, not targeting specific companies, although some data we do collect from some of those companies because terrorists are using that. And you would expect us to get that. When you think about how this whole thing works, how the global cryptologic platform works, there are 2 big issues that can hurt this country from my perspective: terrorism and cyber. We talked about the terrorism problem, but the reason Secretary Gates put Cyber Command at NSA and made it a 4-star command was to keep me on active duty for 4 more years. Or so I'm beginning to think. But it was actually because that's where the nation needed Cyber Command to be, to leverage those capabilities. Because when you think about the flows and the threats that come into this country, over 300 attacks in the last 14 months on Wall Street from distributed denial of service attacks. Last August 11th, 11 August 2012, there was a significant attack on Saudi Aramco. It destroyed the data on over 30,000 systems with a Shamoon-like virus. Another one hit Rosgas and Gutter. And in March and June of 2013, 2 attacks hit South Korea. So we've seen a huge growth in disruptive and an increase in destructive attacks. And from my perspective, we're going to see this continue to grow. And it's the same platform cryptologic capability that we have that we need to see and defend both from terrorist attacks and from cyber. That's why this has been put together like it is. And from our perspective, as American citizens, the same oversight and compliance, the same privacy and civil liberties that we enjoy is for both sides of this. And I think that's huge for our country. And I think this offers us a way of working with partners, allies. It also is a reason for us to work closer with industry. Industry owns and operates 85 to 95% of that infrastructure. The government and industry are going to have to work together. I think that's going to be one of the big things that we face. I also think as we look at this, and we look at the partnerships, many of you may know that the requirements that we get as an intel agency are driven by a national intelligence priority framework. That framework comes from the executive branch and is given to all the agencies, including NSA. And when you think about that, the issue that we're now debating, and part of the President's Review Group will look at what NSA does, and part of the issues going on with the National Security Staff and others will say, so how do we balance that? What is our partnerships, and what do we need for alliances? And from my perspective, we can gain a lot here in partnering with some of these countries. And I think that's something that we have to look at. How are we going to do that? But I would tell you we have to go in with our eyes wide open. It has to be both ways. There's a great article in France 24 by Mr. Scorsini, who was the former director of their internal service of France. And his comment was, we spy on everybody too. Everybody should know that. And hopefully our politicians have been reading the reports we've been sending up showing them we're spying on everybody. We know that. They know that. The question is, what do we need for the future? And how do we go forward? And I think we ought to look and put all this on the table and say, we need the right framework, because defending our countries in cyberspace and in terrorism, those are the two threats for us. I think those are the first and the big ones that we need to look at. Now, there are other issues that we're going to have to address. From my perspective, I think what the executive branch is doing here is a good review, and I think we will do this right. And I think our country will come out better than it was in this area. So there's a lot for hope from my perspective. So what I'm going to do is wrap this up here and then open it up for questions, but let me just give you the bottom line. As I look at what's been going on over the last 5 months, all the leaks and stuff that have come out, ask yourself this: there is nothing that anyone from NSA or Cyber Command has done that is wrong. The first thing that comes out is, this is really bad. Okay, it might not have been that bad, but we really think it could have been bad. You could have misused it, or you could misuse it in the future. From where I sit, we're doing everything we can to do this right. We hold ourselves accountable. We have a tremendous oversight and compliance regimen. And when you look at the truth of some of these compliance issues that people call privacy issues, they turn out not to be that when we put the facts on the table. And this is the key. And you know, I would just leave you with this analogy. You know, the people who stole this data was an IT person, not an intelligence professional. So imagine that this was the IT person in the hospital, and he stole all the plans on how to do operations in the hospital, and he's now advising your doctor on your heart surgery. How comfortable are you? And in this area, it's much more complex. And what they're doing is trying to divine what this data did or what we did with it without actually knowing. And they're making it wrong. And they're hurting our country, they're hurting our industry, and they're hurting our partnerships. And from where I stand, that's wrong. And there's no good that'll come out of it, because from my perspective, we are trying to do everything right here. And so hopefully, saner minds will prevail, and eventually we'll get through this. Our part, we're holding this hornet's nest as long as the nation needs us to. And if Congress or the administration decides that we should put that tool down, we will do that. We will follow the law. We will identify the gap and do everything we can to fix it. But as we've done since I've been there, and it has been my privilege and honor to serve there, these are great people. We will follow the law, and we will do everything we can to defend this country. Last Saturday, final story, I had the privilege and honor of working, again, as we've done every weekend for the past 8 years, supporting some folks in Afghanistan from a potential terrorist attack. And the people that came in have been coming in on and off almost every weekend and every night. They work days too, to save those people forward. And you know, here is the part that makes me so proud. In 8+ years, not one person has ever come up to me and complained about being called in to work, because they know what they're doing is saving lives. And they're damn proud of it. And so am I. So with that, let me open it up to questions.
Thank you enormously. The floor is open for questions. The only thing I would suggest is that there will be a lot of questions, so please make yours as short and succinct as you can.
Let him go first.
Mrs. Hyde has delegated the mic to you, sir.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. Much of what you talked about tonight and much of your activities over the past years have involved the war on terrorism. My question has to do with what is that war all about? Many people I know think it's about religion, and that the Muslims want to convert us to their religion. Others say, oh, they don't like our lifestyle. Others say it's our lack of leadership in the 70-year-old Arab-Israeli conflict. Others say it's just our policies in general. What do you think the main reason that the terrorists hate us so much, and is there any hope for resolving that, getting some sort of end to what's being called a perpetual warfare?
Yes. No, that's a great question. You know, I've had an opportunity over the last 20 years to work in this a lot. I think the best characterization of what we're facing, especially from Al-Qaeda, is their approach to what they call the Grand Caliphate, putting back Islam into a Grand Caliphate under Sharia form of law, where everybody is forced to go towards that's in that, and eventually they'd like the whole world. There was a series of maps about 10 years ago that they showed how they would evolve that Grand Caliphate from the Middle East going out to where it was in the 600 time period to a global caliphate under Muslim rule. Now that's what they want. That's not what all Arabs or all Muslims want, but that's what they're trying for and what they're fighting for from my perspective. Now, there are different branches and different versions as you look at it. There is a Shia, Sunni mix. There are all sorts of problems. I don't know how to stop this war without getting all those countries involved. And that's the key. We're going to have to solve this by having the Middle East and other countries step into this and help more than they have today. And that's hard for them because, as you can see, just with Syria, what's going on there, this is a huge problem. And this is also a great question from your part, because You know, we talked about these tools that we have for stopping terrorist acts. And if you look at, CNN did a great scale that shows up, and I know CNN's back there and they probably will credit me with this later. When you look at the scale, last year was the highest number of people killed from terrorist attacks, over 15,000. And it's more this year. And you look at what's going on in Syria, Egypt, Libya, Iraq, Somalia, Kenya, throughout the Middle East, there is a lot of bad things happening. And I think it's going to get worse. And I think all of us are going to have to work to stop this. This is something that's going to be with us for a while, and it's not going to be easily handled. I don't have a better solution than what they're doing on it. I do think that democracies and stuff, I'll call it the Arab democracy or approach towards that, is going to be part of the solution. And I think everybody's pushing, but this is going to be tough. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Hyde.
Yes, I take the Islamic Jihad very seriously. And you talk about partnership, but I would like to know what you're doing to promote a partnership with the American people. And let me just tell you my personal experience. I was in Washington on September 11th. I could have been killed if that plane had not gone down in Pennsylvania. Prior to that date, I found information on a bulletin board on the internet, and I turned it over to the police, and it was ignored. Again, recently there was a huge white blimp flying around Baltimore for over a week. Nobody bothered to say, what is it doing? I called the FAA, and they said I was the only person who had bothered to call to inquire about this. Everyone is into these devices. They're not paying attention to what's going on around them. How do you plan to get the American citizens involved in what I consider a major threat against our country? Thank you.
That's a great question. In fact, DHS, the Department of Homeland Security.
No. I've called them. They're worthless. They're worthless. You cannot get through. They don't pick up the telephone.
Look at the time.
I've called them over and over and over. I've gone to their office. I've given them stuff. They ignore you. That's what I'm talking about. Thank you.
I'm glad you sugarcoated that.
It's based on fact.
I do agree with you, though, that this is something that we have to do together. I think you raise a very good point. And I would tell you that Secretary Napolitano, who has left DHS, and I think if Jay Johnson is confirmed as the next secretary, takes what you're saying to heart. So when I talk to these people, they do it. I've been in this. Now, it means as an organization, there's a lot that they have to go if they're dropping that information. I apologize. We will work that better. And I don't run DHS, as you may know. Just put that down for the record. I get blamed for enough things already in my current job.
Yes, sir.
General, first of all, and I'm sure everyone here, thanks you for your service to our country. I am curious to know if the President is briefed on everything that goes on at NSA, and if not, who chooses which topic he is briefed on?
Well, everything that goes on at NSA is a lot. And what happens, there's actually a process that goes up through the Director of National Intelligence, Director Jim Clapper, who's a superb individual. You may know him. He has worked 50 years for this country of service, a tremendous civil servant who has done a great job. He and his people take all the information from all the agencies and try to distill it down to briefings to the President, what are called the presidential daily briefs and stuff that go up to the President. But as you can imagine, with all the agencies and all the other things, briefing the President on everything is not practical, is not something that can happen. I do think, from where I stand now, that the President is looking at these issues and has directed the Presidential Review Group to look at that, and I know he's personally involved in this, so I think we're taking that on. These are big issues. The National Intelligence Priority Framework is what gives us our requirements that we execute, not just to NSA, but to all the agencies. And yesterday or the day before, time goes by, we had a hearing, I guess it was the day before, Tuesday, at the House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, and Director Jim Clapper gave a great overview of the requirements process and some of what you asked. I just say that that's open record and probably gives it better than I have here. So thank you for that question.
Yes, sir.
General, I'd also like to thank you for the talk this evening, much appreciated. Two things, very concisely. First, you mentioned at the beginning that you were not wedded to all of these programs, and to the extent that refers and includes the collection of phone metadata within the US, what do you think, what possible replacement would there be to a program like that, in your view? And secondly, you talked about partnerships with allies in foreign countries and putting on the table a debate about how those could perhaps change. Do you think it would be feasible to have an agreement with key allies like France and Germany, under which these countries do not spy on each other for a further end?
Great questions. Let me start with the metadata. This is a tough issue. You know, we've put this metadata program, and I'm serious from my perspective. If we can come up with a better way, and actually I said if anybody else would like to do it, I would hand off this hornet's nest. On a serious note, nobody can do better than NSA what NSA is currently doing to defend this country. So I know it's our job, it's our duty to do that. But your question, to answer it, there are some options. Senator Dianne Feinstein and Senator Saxby Chambliss, the chair and ranking member of the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, just passed a new bill from their committee on the metadata program to change it. It doesn't drop it, it changes it, puts some more teeth into it. I think there are bills that the House will come up with, and then they will work back and forth. I think you'll see other bills come up. Where you want me to enter in on this. My job is to give them the best advice I can on the gaps that are there, what will be created, and what options that we have. So we have actually asked everybody to look at what could you do in replacement of it that would allow us to still connect the dots and be even easier to operate and less intrusive. No one has come up with one. So I would just turn that around and say that's one that if you have an idea, please send it. Send it to me, send it to NSA. We have a place there, please do it. Second, on partnerships with allies. I think, you know, France and Germany, I spent 6.5 years in Europe. Great people. The perception, you now know that fact that these statements about us collecting 70 million records in France and 60 million in Spain were factually incorrect. Those were not collections. That doesn't mean that we don't have focused intelligence programs on France, and France doesn't have it on us and each and everybody else. But your point that I agree with is we can do better as partners, and we should. And so we are sitting down and talking with the Germans and the French and with our other allies to do just that. Where that will go, it has to be both ways, bilaterally. So that means we both have to make agreements and concessions. We're out there in public, but you know, you'd suspect they have intelligence services. They're probably doing something too. That's a joke, I'm sorry. So I do think we have to have that. Why is that partnership so important? Well, I think we can do better on terrorism by partnering, and we're going to need it for cyber. It's our future.
If I could just ask a follow-up question on that. Angela Merkel, who we know
Very quickly,
her
if you
phone was
would.
monitored by the NSA. As she grew up in East Germany, as you know, suffered under the Stasi. How do you think she would have felt on a personal level to discover that her phone was monitored?
I don't know. I don't know the answer, and you know, I would say alleged.
But you know it to be true, so why would you say alleged?
Don't try to carry on the
No,
discussion.
that's
It's
right.
a fair question, isn't it?
Say it's alleged because there are no facts about the actual intercept on her on the table, just as there are none about President Obama or And so from my perspective, I do think that we ought to all look at what it is we do with heads of states and others, and you know that's being looked at now. But it has to be both ways. And I guarantee you that these things do cut both ways. Thank you.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, sir, for giving us such an opportunity as this. I believe if you asked most people, you'd find out there's a consensus that there's a cost to protecting this country. And I'm a good man to think that an informed NSA is imperative if there has to be an effective national security. Now, what is the NSA doing to have the American citizenry warm up to this idea of information gathering?
Well, that's a great question. You know, in terms of transparency, you hit on a core issue, and it goes back to World War II. NSA was built out of World War II, where Enigma was broken by the Brits, the Poles, and our folks. And the secret of that was so important to winning the war in the Atlantic, and the red and purple codes that we broke to winning the war in the Pacific, that the culture was to keep a secret, not to share, because sharing that would mean we'd lose the war. And in fact, at one point in that, as you may know, the three-rotor system, Admiral Dönitz of Germany thought somebody had broken it, so he went to a four-rotor system. And in 1942, for 9 months, it changed the balance in the Atlantic. Now, the Allies rebroke the four-rotor system. They never went to a five or never broke it again, but it brings up the point. So there is a risk in transparency. And so that's why in this area here, I say there's been irreversible and significant damage, because the terrorists now know one of the tools and can at least bypass part of it. But having said it, now that they know, one of the things that we do have to have is a debate with the facts. And that's what we can do, is put out the facts. And that's where the media can help, is to make sure that the information that is put out there is factually correct. I think that's the biggest issue that we face. And when they're corrected, the corrections normally go on page 12 and subtitle in small print that said, you know, Johnny Depp title. And nobody really understands that that's what's happening. Because if you polled most Americans, they would think that we, NSA, are listening to their phone calls and reading their emails. But that's factually incorrect. It's not happening. You know, we get the to-from data in a call detail record. It has nothing to do with the content of a phone call. For us to do that under FISA, we need a court order. And so from my perspective, those kinds of inaccuracies have to be policed up. So what you're hitting on is the key to helping inform this debate and getting it to where it needs to be. A well-educated America would take the right steps here and do the right thing. So thanks. That's a great question.
Ambassador Rosapep.
Thank you. I'm Jim Rosapep. I was U.S. Ambassador to Romania in the second Clinton administration. I've dealt with people spying on us, and I've dealt with us spying on other people, not at the professional level you have. But I guess my question is, and you're not a policymaker, you're a policy implementer, but you have been involved in these debates and thought about this a lot. I want to come back to this issue of the Chancellor of Germany and the President of Brazil and the Brazilian oil company. As you know, the President of Brazil canceled the state dinner with President Obama around exactly this issue. I think most Americans and most Germans and most Brazilians understand why we would tap people's phones and read their emails, to the extent we do that, in addition to the metadata, to try to catch people who are going to blow up planes and kill people. I think it is more challenging for most people in most countries to understand how we use the same tools on the leaders of allies and private businesses. So I'd just like you to address that issue. What is the national security justification? And we all joke about everybody spying on everybody, but that's not jokes are not a national security justification. What is the national security justification for using the tools that we use on terrorists, on the democratically elected leaders of allies and private businesses?
So, so that's a great question.
Thank you.
That's a great question. In fact, as an ambassador, you have part of the answer. Because, you know, we, the intelligence agencies, don't come up with the requirements. The policymakers come up with the requirements.
And I agree with you. You're the implementer. I'm
That's
asking
right.
you the question,
So-
what is the policy justification?
That's right. And so one of those groups would have been, let me think, hold on. Oh, ambassadors.
Not me. With all due respect, I appreciate your sense of humor. But the reality is that in an institutional sense, the United States government is doing this. Obviously, as an ambassador, obviously as a business person, obviously an elected official, I'd love to hear what the people I'm negotiating with their position is. But we generally don't do that in democratic societies. We don't do that in private business. We do it in international security. I'm asking you, what is the national security justification for what we don't do in democracies and what we don't do in private business?
Right. So, you know, there is a National Intelligence Priorities Framework.
Right.
And that framework is driven by the policymakers on the intelligence needs that they have. Those intelligence needs say things like a European financial crisis, where it's going, what's happening on it. These kinds of things result in collection activities. When somebody says, we want to know leadership intentions, I'm trying to think, what do you, if you want to know leadership intentions, these are the issues. So I think that's part of the current policy discussion,
Okay.
to say, okay, from where I stand, the question is, so do you need all that data? So I would turn it around and say, I actually think there's a better way to do it. We can look at some of these and say, hold it, some of this is not needed from a defend the nation. As a military person, our first priority is to defend this country, protect our civil liberties and privacy, partner with our allies to accomplish that mission, which includes counterterrorism and cyber. And I think those partnerships have greater value than some of the collection.
Thank you.
And we ought to look at it like that. Does that
Good
make sense?
answer. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Okay. General, first, thank you for your service. As you have seen through the night, like people are very obsessed what government does, but I'm not. My question is like, who gives so much power to companies to spy there? Imagine like you as a cyber expert, when people has to apply on a job online today, give so much information before coming to any consideration to be hired. And people never question, no media, no one in this affair, they mentioned about that.
I'm not sure I understood the question.
But when you apply on the job today on the internet, you have to give so much private information, which increases your probability to be stolen identity. That's what I'm talking about.
I see, yeah. And so why? I think, you know, the real issue that you have here for your personally identifiable information and security on the internet, there's a lot that we need to do on the internet. You know, in my longer speech, and I didn't want to put everyone asleep, when you look at cybersecurity, one of the things that we need to do is to change the framework. And I think if we change the framework, the personally identifiable information and stuff that you now have to put in, that you do all this stuff on, you know, think about all the forms that we fill out where you could press a button on an iPhone. That's where the class is over here. They will fix this for us, our future. But, you know, you could push that. You wouldn't have to fill that out. It would be transmitted as your identity. And I think identity management and those kinds of things will revolutionize this area. But first, we have to secure it. And that's a key point. So thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yes, General, thank you so much for the service of you and your organization to our country. My question has not so much to do with individual liberties and so forth, but it's reported there are nation states, pick your one, I'll pick China, that attack our industry to steal secrets and processes and that kind of thing. And in the long term, that will undermine our national security. I'm a little unclear on how That seems like kind of a mismatch for a nation state to pick on a company, individual company. What does your organization do to help with that? And if it isn't your organization, what organization is it?
So there is a lot that the government is doing here, both at the unclassified level and the classified level, to push back on the theft of intellectual property. I agree with you. This is one of the greatest risks to our nation. It's our future economic wealth. The theft of intellectual property is the greatest transfer of wealth in history. And it's hurting our country and will hurt our future. So there's a couple things we have to do. But first, it goes back to the question that the gentleman over here asked. We have to have a defensible architecture and defend our architectures. You are right, though, in this one key part that you bring out. These are nation states against companies, and it's not fair. And we have to have a way of government and industry working together. To solve this problem, it's going to take both of us working, because we have special skills. We can help, but we can't do it today without legislation. So some of the bills that are being pushed in Congress right now are for information sharing to help solve that problem that you've identified, that we've identified, we know has to be fixed. So you have to do both. We have to have the information sharing, and we have to fix our architecture. Those will be key for the future.
Yeah. So it is NSA, you would say, as the lead of the plethora of government agencies for helping there? Or
no, actually, DHS is the front door for dealing with industry. FBI does the law enforcement. NSA and Cyber Command defend the nation and provide the foreign intelligence. So those are kind of the missions that we have aligned, and we all work together as a team. So Janet Napolitano, Bob Mueller, and I created that, what we call the bubble chart. And now Jim Comey has come in as the new director of FBI, absolutely super to work with, and I think you see a great partnership. But the real problem that we have is that we don't have the authority to share data. In fact, there's a barrier there. Congress has got to help us.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. The far mic.
Hi, General. Thank you for speaking with us today. This is my first time here, so it's a pleasure to have you as our guest. I guess my question is more along the lines of this privacy that we have as individuals. With the information that's out there, that's given on private businesses on the internet, where do you find that we have the NSA and the private businesses? Where is there some alignment or transparency between the information that's being put out there and that we basically are shelling out? Like where does the information that we have or that the government has and the private businesses have, how does that translate back to the individual and how we're hurt by it, or how does it help us? I mean,
Okay,
earlier,
so
yeah, go ahead.
no, that's a great question. So from what you have that's in this real key program is the business records FISA. So these are called call detail records, but when you make a phone call, a to from on a long distance phone call, you have your number, another number, the date, time group in that. Your name, not there. Just the two numbers, the date, time group, and the duration of the call. Those four elements go into a database. And so we'll put this database in a lockbox, if you will. Yours goes there, mine goes there, all of ours goes there. What we're looking for is are any of those, when we see this terrorist communication coming into the United States, we have to have reasonable articulable suspicion that it's associated with Al-Qaeda. Then once we have that, which was that Najibullah Zazi case, we audit and articulate that this actually meets that standard. One of the 22 people authorized to do that. They put it on a list. Then one of our 35 analysts are authorized to then take that number and look in the database. They unlock it, they look in, they can do 1, 2, or 3 hops. And when they do that, what they're looking to see is that number touch any other terrorist organizations. And if they do, they can tell the FBI, here's 2 more numbers you need to look at quickly because there's a potential issue. This was developed to handle that 9/11 thing where Midar, who was in San Diego, we didn't know it, we should have. And so this filled the gap. And as you may know, Midar was on the plane that crashed into the Pentagon, American Airlines Flight 77. So what we do is we give that data and only that data. Your name, the content of your communications, and the content of your emails are not there. We don't have those.
Then is there a reason that private businesses are up in arms with what the NSA is doing with the information they have?
I think where the private businesses come in, the Yahoo, the Google, and others, there's two issues that come up. First, they're being hurt by this unjustly because they're being compelled by a court order in the other program, which is a program where we now, remember in the first case I talked about a terrorist in Afghanistan or Pakistan. That terrorist, we can show that this is an associate of Al-Qaeda. Based on a court order, the FAA 702 court order, we can go with that email address to that service provider and get the content of that foreign communication. And we did that. That's how we found out about the bomb. What they are interested in is that's not very frequent. They want to give out the numbers. That's their first issue that they have. So that the American people and the rest of the world knows this isn't everything. This is a small number, analogous to what other countries would do in law enforcement type programs. And the second, and I think the biggest thing is, they keep getting spun in the papers with what's going on, and it's hurting their business. It's hurting their top line. The way these are being spread, it's hurting American business. It's hurting our economy. I talked to 7 or 8 CEOs yesterday, and they will tell you this is hurting their business around the world. Now, part of that is the economy globally. People are competing with us. And so much of this is elbowing, protectionism, and other things that are going on, but it's hurting American business. I don't know how to fix that second one. I really don't. But those are great questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, General. First of all, thank you so much for your service. We truly appreciate it. And second of all, it was a pleasure listening to you tonight. My question comes at an opportune time. In terms of the U.S. position on Edward Snowden, I know you can't go into much detail regarding him, but what are the steps that the U.S. is taking in terms of prevent Edward Snowden from leaking further information that he may have had access to before?
That's a great question. This is very hard. I wish there was a way to prevent it. Snowden has shared somewhere between 50 and 200,000 documents with reporters. Those will continue to come out. They're being put out in a way that does the maximum damage to NSA and our nation. And it goes back to this gentleman that was over here, his comment, and it's hurting our industry. I think it's wrong. I don't know how to stop it. There is no reason. You know, some people are making money off of this, and they see it as a way to do it, and they want to look noble. But I'll tell you, this increases the probability that a terrorist attack will get through. I think it's absolutely wrong. When we look back on this, people are going to see that and understand that and say what they did was wrong. Until then, we're at their mercy. They're putting them out 1 or 2 a week to cause the maximum problem. They get it wrong. It's like this data on France. That had nothing to do with collection on France. None of that information was collected by NSA, and none of that information was collected in France on French people or European citizens. That data was data in support to military operations for NATO-related activities. Nothing to do with the same with Spain. Yet the uproar in Europe over this is huge. And it's interesting. It's almost like the war of the worlds. Everybody's in uproar over collection on a country that never took place. And we've given that data back to each of the countries so they know. Now you know. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Good evening, sir. It was really good hearing you. This is my first time actually attending an event like this, and I sat over there like, okay, question? And one thing that really stuck in my mind was when you talked about our future. My daughter had the opportunity of working for NSA throughout her high school career. and she did a really good job, and I was really proud of that. She worked for NSA and SSA through a work study stay in school program. But as she went to graduate, the program stopped. She went on to graduate from college. And my question is, you know, in the future, do you guys have any programs available for college students to allow them to continue the training and experience necessary to continue to help you guys in the future?
That's a great question. We do. We have a number of programs like that. I think, first, thanks for your daughter and her service. I have 4 daughters, as I said. If they lived in this area, I would want them to work at NSA. The greatest people, they really, it's like a family. And I think your daughter would tell you that. We have a whole series of scholarship programs and other Stokes scholarships, absolutely superb. You know, going through graduate school, we're sending folks to Harvard, MIT, and other great graduate schools, and then they come and work at NSA for 30 years, hopefully. And we have what we call graduate development programs for both the college and the graduate level. So there are a number of programs, and there are, I think all of those are on the websites. And you ought to tell your daughter, 1, thanks, and 2, apply for some of the graduate programs. They're superb.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir.
I have to apologize to everybody who's at the mics. It's 10 after 7, which is when we normally end the Q&A period. So with that said, I'd like to thank General Alexander for what has been an absolutely splendid evening.